Okay, so a fair bit's happened since I was last live on a live stream in the last week. The IPL in India is the big story of it being suspended due to the ongoing COVID pandemic. What's happening with the New York Rangers in regards to Tom Wilson only getting a fine, and that their GM and head of hockey operations have been fired by the organisation, which is interesting considering that they were already eliminated from the playoffs. There's things going on with the Rangers. The Rangers are stating it's not related to the response on social media and the statement released by the Rangers organisation to what happened with Tom Wilson and the injury to Artemi Panarin. That's an interesting one. Obviously, the Champions League final is going to be an English affair with Man City versus Chelsea. The protests at Man United in regards to the European Super League ongoing, the protests against the owners. Other clubs have also had protests as well, but Man United have had several security breaches at training ground and at stadium, which led to the postponement of Liverpool Man United, which now means Manchester United now have 4 games to play in less than a week. Now, in that regard, this is not the first security breach we've seen at Old Trafford since the Glazers have owned the club. And the fact in the space of a week and a half they've broken into the training ground and into the stadium is highlighting some concerns about the security protocols in place at Old Trafford. So that'll be interesting. The IPL is the big news for me in the fact that the tournament started and several Australian players have said that they want to return home. They no longer want to play. They highlighted that. I think it was 3 Australian players. Now there's been a whole host of other players, both Indian players domestically and overseas players, uncertain about things. And the IPL organisers have decided, with what's going on in India right now, with the rate of infection, the real bad outbreak of the coronavirus over there, is to suspend play. That doesn't mean that they're going to completely abandon the 2021 IPL season. They are suspending play. How long that lasts is another interesting point, and what happens especially to Australian cricketers wanting to come home. Also, you have to consider this: India are planning to play a test match against England this summer, so will that be put on hold as well? Obviously, we know the ECB have made massive losses in the last 12 months. You've got the 100 lined up. Will Indian players be allowed to play in that? I'm not a fan of the 100. I made that clear from the announcement, but the ECB are banking on this tournament to make them some money. So that'll be really interesting to see what happens with the IPL and test matches in the next few months, especially with Indian players. Obviously, are they going to be able to come over here? Will they play over here? Will the IPL be finished in time? How much money will it cost the game in India? How much money will it cost the game in general? With all the TV rights the IPL has. So that'll be very, very interesting to see what actually occurs with the IPL and how long it's suspended for and if they resume play, if at all. On the Man United side of things, because of the Liverpool game being postponed, that now means they are playing 4 games in 7 days. They obviously have the second leg against Roma tonight. They have the game against Villa at the weekend. And then they have 2 games next week, including a game against Leicester and then Liverpool in a very condensed schedule. Now, obviously, the onus on that is what's happened with the fan protests. This Super League idea hasn't died a death completely. Okay, so we've got Jonathan 45. I'm not a Man United fan. I'm a Blackburn fan. That's well known on the channel. My fandom of teams. I'm in the same boat. I'm not a fan of the Venky's family and how they've run my club. Again, with the amount of debt incurred. But the fact that there's been 2 high-profile security breaches within the last 2 weeks in regards to this issue, and that there have been ongoing protests, not just at Man United, but a whole host of other clubs as well, and that in itself raises concerns. I think what I fear is that the footballing authorities will water down any kind of punishment that these clubs receive, if any. We've discussed, what should these clubs receive as punishment on the channel and live streams, like what should they receive. I'm thinking points deduction for next season and some maybe a transfer ban or a European ban. So we'll see what happens. I mean, what is interesting is, yes, the scenes were bad. There's no denying that they weren't good viewing. Yes, it was a small number that were violent. There were some that were very, very peaceful in their protest inside Old Trafford and at Carrington. There were others that did take it to a violent level. There were clashes with police. It's the same with the Chelsea protest outside the ground the other week. When Petr Cech had to calm down, they were getting the crowd grew. The protests at Arsenal, where there were fans of other clubs in and around London and who turned up as well, who weren't part of the 12 breakaway Super League clubs. The reaction from fans is very interesting because even in America, a lot of the American fans are actually, well, they love the sport for the precise reason we have promotion and relegation, for the precise reason that it's not franchise based, it's community based sport. I do think, yeah, there are better ways to protest, but for many years, fan protests have done nothing to raise the issue of ticket prices, poor ownership. FC United and Manchester, AFC Liverpool, rival clubs have been set up by disenfranchised fans that feel that fans do not have enough say in how their teams are run. And you look at Mike Ashley trying to sell Newcastle, that's gone off the news. Newcastle fans have been very, very vocal in their protest against his ownership of the team. But I think for too long, the footballing authorities have been weak. And that's my way of looking on it. They've not had strong leadership on a variety of issues. And if you look back at when I'm going to hark back to the Mark Sampson situation, for example, when he was sacked as England women's manager, the FA were brought before a parliamentary select committee, and then the report stated that the FA was not for purpose in a whole range of areas. And some of those reforms still have not been enacted. Greg Clark resigning partway through a crisis period anyway hasn't helped. And now you've got the social media boycott that's in place. That's not only football, but other sports are joining. And those sports that haven't actually signed up as a whole sporting wide body, individual athletes and teams have also joined. So there is a lot going on. And it is concerning. I mean, the Super League in rugby league is planned to shrink to 10 teams. That's on the table. And that's going to put a lot of people out of work. Yeah, Ed Woodward going is one thing. He's still there till the end of the season. That's another 2 months. He's still there until at least the Europa League final when the transfer window opens. Until the transfer window officially opens, he's still in a position. That is a problem. As a businessman, he's made the Glazers a lot of money. I have no doubt in his business acumen that he's a very capable business operator. In that regard, he should be what Man United need and a lot of clubs need is a director of football. Ed Woodward is director of finance, basically. That's how you would have director of corporate affairs. And if that was his role, just merchandising, merchandise sales, selling the product, working out sponsorship deals, he's good at that. On the transfer side of things, the actual footballing playing side of things, it's been nothing short of a disaster. Now, he has been there a long time. Look at Man United since Ferguson retired, basically. And the same with Arsenal with Wenger. Be careful what you wish for. Now, both those clubs have declined. It shows how good Wenger and Ferguson were as managers to win them as much silverware as they did with what appears to be shocking backroom policy. So on the field, the two coaches are brilliant. They're the two most successful managers the English game has ever seen, and just domestic football in general have ever seen. They're two of the most successful managers in the history of club football. There is no denying that. But you have to look at the boardroom with Arsenal and Man United, and you actually look at it, and it is a shambles. It's an absolute shambles. You've got, Kroenke, the Kroenke family at Arsenal, and you've got the Glazers at Man United. And the debt these clubs have is shocking for the success they've had. And the fact that they're always in Europe, pretty much, for the most part. The occasional season where they miss out. But for the most part, they're European stalwarts. They're regularly making it into the knockout stages of European competition. They're playing at the highest level. They've got two of the biggest stadiums in the country. They've got some of the highest ticket prices in the country. Season tickets and just regular match day tickets, if you can get hold of them for allocation. Two of the biggest fan bases. The success they've had, be it domestically or making finals in Europe, and you can argue on the lack of success for Arsenal and the success for Man United. But you look at it, how they're run off the field is nothing short of scandalous with the amount of debt. And this is true for most of the 12 clubs, apart from Chelsea. Chelsea, ironically, are the only club that actually, when information requests were put forward to see what state financially they were the only club to make a profit. Chelsea, the only club in profit out of the 12. Liverpool did not disclose their financial situation under JW Henry. Likelihood is they're probably operating at a slight loss. The other 10, the debt levels and the loss levels are ridiculous. Tottenham, I think, are the most exposed to not winning any silverware this season, sacking Mourinho and then paying him out. I think his payout was £34 million from Tottenham. Now, in my mind, that is ridiculous. Whether you like or dislike Mourinho, and as a United fan, you can have your view on that. As a manager, he wins trophies, even with average sides. He did it with United. He did win a Europa League final. He did win some silverware. Let's not deny that. He still bought them European silverware. Whether it's not because it's not Champions League, it's the minor competition. He brought them silverware at a time where the club were not doing very well in the league. They were middling, not really challenging for the title. Struggles on the field. He still managed to get them silverware. Van Gaal got them silverware. So when you got fans just slating the ownership, yeah, but look at what the managers have got to deal with. They've got a squad that is not as good as it should be with the financial clout these clubs have. And it's like Wenger winning those last couple of FA Cups to put the cherry on the cake and become the most successful FA Cup manager. He wasn't given the tools at his disposal to compete regularly for the titles. He would always finish fourth or fifth at a push. And the Arsenal fans turned against him. It's not Wenger's fault. It really wasn't. You've got to be careful what you wish for. So he goes, I'm staying down, I'm retiring, I'm done. Same with Fergie. And it's all gone to pot. Ferguson never had this crap from the fans. He had the crap from the board in the beginning, in the early days, in the 80s. But the fans never said Fergie out. You've got to be careful what you wish for, though. Man United fans knew Ferguson was winding down in the last few seasons he was there. It was a matter of when he would retire. Wenger, it was a matter of when he decided the time was right to go. You've got to be careful what you wish for. And I say that because these are the two most consistent clubs, I think, in the Premier League era. In my mind, look where they are now. Now, Solskjaer is doing a very good job with the tools at his disposal. It doesn't help with the backroom stuff and the off-field stuff. In my mind, there's a lot of other questions to be asked, not just about football ownership and the amount of debt involved in the sport. And I think this European Super League, a couple of months ago, I was saying there needs to be a salary cap in football, and people were like, never happened. Now I think it's more likely to happen within the next 5 years. UEFA, I think, will be pushed into a corner. Fan groups are not going away with the 50+1 ownership model that they want across Europe. Not just the German model, but across Europe, or the Spanish model where you elect a club president. Those calls for more fan involvement, how clubs are run, are not going away. Now, yes, you mentioned, Jonathan, that too many people are involved in running sports teams that have no idea what they're doing. And this is true. This is true up and down Premier League, up and down professional sports in general. There are too many non-footballing or non-sporting brains running teams or in positions where they shouldn't be. And at the same time, there's not enough ex-players and ex-coaches and ex-referees involved in administrating the game and giving feedback to the FA, for example. Right, so the IOC, that's a bit of a mess when it comes to, political interference, because we know that there are corruption allegations going with the IOC, with host cities going back to the 90s at least. I think the IOC, the Olympics have been used as political points before with boycotts in the 80s. The IOC got to tread carefully. There are issues with this Olympics. It may not go ahead. We know that there is a rise in cases in Japan. Whether fans will be allowed to, spectators will be allowed in, is another question. The Japanese government have got very political with the Olympics, saying it's going ahead this year. They don't want to cancel it at all. The Japanese public are turning against it. That'll be very interesting to see if there's protests against the Olympics. We'll see. The Glasgow Clown, we knew about their arena issues last year. with the arena operators going into administration. As a Bracknell Bees fan, I know we no longer have an arena. We're now sharing with Slough. So when it comes to indoor sports like ice hockey and basketball, arena operators are in trouble. And a part of that is to do with the grants given out by the British government. The devolved governments had their own separate policies. And so sports teams in Scotland have been hammered more than in other parts of the UK. And that's had an effect on the Glasgow Arena. I forget who runs the arena, but I know the company is facing some real financial difficulties, and that is a problem. There's a whole host. So indoor sports such as ice hockey and basketball are facing massive funding problems, and it's to do with arena availability, not the teams themselves. It's the people who operate their arenas that they play in. That's known. But the Olympic Games political protests have been always banned. It's to be for the athletes, not the politicians, but there's always politics involved in the Olympics. I did hear about Villa with Istanbul, obviously meant to be the host city. Villa have gone to UEFA and said, look, both these teams are English based. We're an English based club. With the issues we had in 2019 with the two European finals, one in Baku and then one in, I believe it was Spain, very difficult to get to. The reaction from fans, especially with the Baku Europa League final that we had a couple of years ago. I think UEFA will be mindful that if let's say in Asia, where Turkey technically is geographically, with some of the issues that we're having with security in that part of the world, with the Syrian conflicts and the refugee crisis over there, and on top of that, issues with the pandemic being worse, let's say, in Asia, parts of Asia. Yes, that is an option that UEFA are considering. Yes, I have read that article. UEFA have tendered a bid in to be an emergency backup should Istanbul not be able to accommodate Man City and Chelsea. I think it makes logical sense on the logistics, because they are doing some trial venues to allow fans back in this country in a variety of sporting venues. They did it at the League Cup final between Spurs and Man City the other day, where I think they allowed 8,000 fans in. It would be interesting if Villa is given the green light to, see if that could be a venue. Yes, the Ricoh Arena, that's been nothing short of a disaster for the best part of 15 odd years, or however long it's been since Highfield Road was demolished and that arena was built. It's been nothing short of a problem for Wasps, Coventry City, the city in general. It's been an absolute money pit. It's caused issues for Coventry City, and now it's causing issues for Wasps. Wasps are only in this position because of COVID. If COVID hadn't have struck, Coventry wouldn't be allowed back on the lease. Players said it's a money move on Wasps' part to cover their losses. Plain and simple. Sisu are still issues there. I don't know the full ins and outs of it. I know there was the Coventry City Redevelopment Fund or whatever. The city of Coventry actually owned the stadium at one point. It's gone through several hands. The Ricoh has been nothing short of a complete and utter mess from the day it was first groundstone went in to the day it was officially opened, to the fact that Coventry have been out of that stadium several times. They've played games at Northampton in that period. Wasps obviously relocated up there from London. They became the owners of the stadium after being tenants there. They had a disagreement, obviously, with Coventry City and the Coventry City ownership over tenancy agreements. The Coventry City were back in the wilderness again. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the arrangement they've come to suits both parties, and it's more stable long term. It is. You'll also be surprised how many teams do not own their stadiums in full or in part. Like Stamford Bridge is leased by Chelsea. They sold a fair proportion of their stake in it to a different company, and hence why they can't redevelop it. Which is an issue that Chelsea have, is they don't own Stamford Bridge, for example. Now, Widnes Vikings, they're in Rugby League. Their stadium is owned by the council. And they went into administration a couple of years ago, which I on the channel. And so, yeah, there's the amount of sports teams whose owners also own the stadium or the arena, who have to lease and rent, is ridiculous. Ice hockey is a sport that's very open to that kind of issue. Planet Ice is the biggest owner of ice rinks. Look, I've seen a mixed response to the redesigned England crest. Um, uh, at the end of the day, like, to me, it's not as bad as the Leeds United plans for their redesigned crest that fell through. Um, Sports teams, be it national teams or club teams, will regularly review their logo, their crest, and make changes accordingly. You see it a lot in the NHL and the NFL and in Major League Baseball. There'll be redesigns of the design and rebrandings. Now, this is an FA decision. They've obviously spent a lot of money on this. It'll be interesting to see how much money they spent and how many designs they looked at before settling it. Whether it's a temporary design or it's a permanent change. From what I've read, I believe it's temporary. I think it's to represent the men's game, the women's game, and the youth game. I think that is a fair representation if that is the design. Whether it's a temporary logo change or it's a rebranding, we'll wait and see. But it'll be interesting to see how many designs they went through before settling on that particular design and how much money is spent, because the FA does get government assistance. So taxpayer money has gone into the FA, partly with the Wembley Stadium, partly through COVID. So it'll be interesting to see how much money was actually spent on that redesign and how many different designs they looked at before settling on that logo. But sports teams and sports leagues regularly review their branding. They update their branding and their logos and their crests regularly. Man City have done it. Chelsea have done it. I think, who else has done it? There's been a couple of rugby league teams have done it. Ice hockey teams have done it. Major League Baseball, NFL. Yeah, regularly, logos change. The logos I'm wearing, to me, it's just a temporary rebranding for whatever the campaign is. I don't think it's permanent. I haven't read enough on it, but I do. There's a temporary logo change. They're trying to obviously say the diversity of the youth game, the women's game, the men's game, and I understand that there are ways of doing it with merchandising and stuff. But at the same time, we'll just have to see what pans out. From what I gather, it's a temporary logo change. It's been unveiled. We'll see what the reaction is in whole. I've seen. It's the same with I mean, I look at a lot of the Bristol Bears. That's a complete rebranding in the last couple of years. I think it's temporary from what I've read. It may be permanent. If it's permanent, we'll see what the reaction is. Look at the Leeds United crest, for example, when they redesigned that. The fan reaction, they very quickly pulled the design and they kept with the old logo. Leeds have changed their crest about 4 or 5 times. Sheffield Wednesday have gone back to their original owl design with a few modern tweaks to it. Spurs have altered their cockerel on a football. Arsenal have altered the cannon. Blackburn have altered the design of the rose and the crest somewhat. Chelsea, as I say, with the lion. Millwall have altered their design several times. A whole host of Brighton and Hove have altered the seagulls occasionally. They've changed. They've been up at Brighton and Hove Albion on there. West Brom with the Hawthorns and the baggy. The little bird, they've changed their crest a few times and tweaked it. So this regularly happens. I think this rebranding, though, I'm not sure. I knew nothing of it until this morning when I was reading the news. When I woke up this morning, just had a quick look on the social media and the news. And from what I can gather on social media, it's gone down like a sack of steaming shit. But that's because I don't think the FA is really engaged with fans, and this is what these fan protests are all about. Because of the Super League, there was no fan engagement. This is something that a lot of sports, I think, could learn from. Is fan engagement is crucial. If your customer base, because they treat us as customers now, not fans, remember that. If the people you're targeting with your merchandise aren't happy with it, they're not going to buy it. I look at the NHL, my favourite league. The amount, I mean, this is not the original Arizona logo. The Kachina was the original Arizona logo. People hated it at the time. They love it now because it's retro. The original Jets logo is not this one. This is the rebranding. Teams rebrand themselves all the time. The Ottawa Senators have gone back to their original logo. and they rebranded that previous logo twice. So just changing the design. So design changes with logos happen. It's how you give feedback to your fan base. It's how you interact, saying we are considering options. Do you want to keep the crest, change the crest? We're looking at rebranding. We're open to discussion. I think there's not enough discussion with fans when it comes to sports, especially with branding, especially with the direction the sport's taking. We're stakeholders. So I look at some of my hockey jerseys and I look at the line of history and how they change. My hockey team's had 4 different logos in its existence. They have rebranded 4 times. I've got a logo for each generation of rebranding. I'm quite happy with the current logo. I like it. It's actually 5 times with a name change. So I look at it from the point of view is I've seen teams rebrand their logo. I've seen international sporting bodies rebrand their logo, be it the IIHF, the NHL, Shield, the Major League Baseball, NFL. Arizona have changed their logo several times. The Jets have got their secondary logos, which they've changed and updated. You've got the alternate thirds. Colorado have changed their logo. I mean, San Jose have made tweaks. The Florida Panthers. I look at, for me, I think it is a marketing campaign. I think it's a temporary logo. It'd be interesting to see how much thought they put into this marketing campaign and how much, fan feedback, I think. To me, I only found out about it today that they were doing it. So that says to me that they haven't really, how do I put it, reached out to the fan base. To be honest, I don't mind it as much. It's the lack of communication between us, the fans, and the governing body. The same with what we're seeing with the clubs protesting, the fans protesting over the Super League announcement and then those plans, how quickly it came out of the blue. And also the lack of involvement fans have and the way we feel priced out. I think it's a marketing thing. I think they're just trying to do it. It's like the Champions League new format coming in a couple of seasons. It doesn't work for football. It works for, let's say, ice hockey or baseball or basketball, because those type of sports, it does work with that kind of playoff structure. Whereas in football, it doesn't work. With the style of sport played, it doesn't even work for rugby, to be fair, league or union. So I'm looking at the changes to the Champions League format, and UEFA have gone, we need to, reform. And I think Serafin is the right guy to be in charge of UEFA. There's no doubt on that in my mind. Serafin is the guy to take UEFA forward for the next decade, in my opinion. I think he should be there for a while because I think he is a reformer. He's not the only guy to have said this is the format. I think he's taken on board clubs. He's taken on board club presidents, sponsors, TV companies. He's had to list all these various parties. He's sent out, obviously, a team of bigwigs, brain people to work out a format. And they've obviously discussed with other sports because it's the Swiss model, which does work in other sports like ice hockey and badminton and I think a few other European-based sports like basketball. It does work in other sports. It just doesn't work for football. In my mind, if you want to get fans back on board and really get the Champions League and Europa League, bring back the Cup Winners' Cup, get rid of this new third competition they brought in, straight knockouts Europa League, straight knockouts Champions League, make the Champions League the champions of each federation, which means there'll be 55 champions plus the winner of the Europa League, which makes you 56. That'd be 7 or 8 rounds to the final. Same for the Europa, the runner-up in that league. Bosch and maybe the Cup Winners' Cup winner from the previous season. How that works. Cup Winners' Cup, you would have to figure out how you would enter those teams, but in basic theory, you could have 56 teams in each competition. At which point, that's 7 or 8 rounds worth of competition, most likely 8. Bosh, that's 8 game days, 8 extra fixtures maximum you have to play, or 15, sorry, home and away legs. It's 15 extra games max, and there you go. It means the smaller clubs who wouldn't otherwise get past the group stage in the Champions League or Europa League have a chance to actually knock out a big boy and go on a very long cup run and actually expose their players in their league to a wider TV audience. Because then fans are going, who's this club from? Let's insert the Austrian league. Although there's some big clubs in Austria that have actually had some pretty good European success. in decades past, or the Czech League, or the Slovene League, or the imagine having Dinamo Zagreb or Hajduk Split at the top level of European football again, or Red Star Belgrade. Imagine that. And that's but the big teams are saying we're playing too many games. So if you were to do that format, you actually play less. That's the irony of it. The big teams are saying we don't like this format; it's too many games. You want less games, you go straight to knockouts. You get rid of the group stage, and you get rid of those pointless dead rubbers that fans hate. Fans hate the group stage of the Champions League and Europa League because, as things currently stand, the third place team in a Champions League group goes into the Europa League. They join the Europa League, right? They fail. Basically, it's rewarding failure, so you drop down a competition, which means those teams in that competition, Europa League, that have got through the group stage, have struggled through the group stage, had to play home and away against tough opposition themselves, battled their way through, suddenly get a team that hasn't had to have that grind, and they're just thrown in there. But I think, for me, straight knockouts, bring back the Cup Winners' Cup. It revalues the domestic cup competitions. Get rid of replays in domestic cup competitions. I think the FA are going to stick with no replays for furthermore. You actually reduce fixtures, you reduce fixture congestion, and you mean those every single match means something. There's no dead rubbers, which means you don't have these games where players get unnecessarily injured, where you have to constantly rotate and rest players because you're playing less games. It makes more sense to me. It does mean, yeah, less prize money, but it actually means fans, when we're allowed to go back to stadiums, will value that match more. The atmospheres will be intense from the first minute to the last. Imagine going to, like, I don't know, a team in Finland or Norway. Let's say Rosenborg in Norway or Molde, and they're big clubs in Norway, by the way. And they have played in Europe. They've done very well. They got to some quarterfinals in there. Imagine Rosenborg go on a run. They come up against, let's say, Leicester win the FA Cup this year. Right? Let's say it's Cup Winners' Cup. Rosenborg have won the Norwegian Cup. Leicester have won the FA Cup, and they meet, let's say, in a quarter final in the Cup Winners' Cup. That wouldn't happen in any other normal season. These two teams will not play against each other in a regular, normal, current Champions League season. It'd be highly unlikely. Imagine that. That will be an intense game where you've got the best team in Norway and one of the best teams in England going hammer and tong, and the Norwegian players. The coaching staff at Leicester would not have an idea on half of these players. They would have to really scout these players. And Rosenborg would be like, we're up for this, or Molde, depending, because they're the two biggest teams in Norway, would be really up for it, I'll tell you that, because they know that everyone watches the Premier League on TV. So their coaching staff and their players will actually have a pretty good idea of what they're coming up against. Whereas the Leicester players, for example, if they were to win the FA Cup, or Chelsea, would not have a frigging clue about half these players unless they've got Norwegian players or players who played in the Norwegian League in their squads, which is highly unlikely. Imagine that. Rosenborg do an upset, they get through to a later stage in the competition, or Molde, for example. That'd be brilliant. That for me would be brilliant. You know, imagine Helsingborg in Sweden getting back. It would be more positive for the game because you get other clubs that otherwise wouldn't have that global audience getting the exposure again that they haven't had for 20 years. This is where UEFA went wrong, was reformatting the Champions League constantly throughout the 90s. They rebranded it from the Cup, well, the European Cup to the Champions League. Yet half the teams in the Champions League shouldn't be there because they're not champions of anything. They finished second, third, or fourth. For me, that is where they went wrong. The rebranding of the UEFA Cup to the Europa League and get rid of the Cup Winners' Cup, to me, was a mistake. Absolute mistake. And it's led to this position with the European Super League. 22 years later, we have this Europe. I mean, the European Super League has been floated around every couple of seasons. Now they're saying, I'll bring Rangers and Celtic into the English league system where you just killed Scottish football. It's taken 21 years for Scotland to qualify for a tournament. It should have taken place last year, but it's taken 2 decades for Scotland to qualify for an international tournament. And now there are talks of let's devalue their league even further. Because I don't think Aberdeen and Motherwell and Hibs and Hearts can carry Scottish football without the old firm. These Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs need big investment so they can challenge the old firm, but there's no point because the TV money isn't there. And that's the Scottish FA and the Scottish Premiership and the Scottish Football League not arguing for a better TV deal with Sky and BT. After Setanta collapsed, Scottish football died with it. And that's why it's taken the best part of another decade after that collapse to get back onto the top of things. But Like, yeah, it would be nice. I think. Oh, look, I mean, looking at the World Cup and all that, and how and growing, and growing the Euros as well, and expanding it in a pan-European tournament. Um, I think UEFA, the Nations League was just, an unnecessary tournament. Just get rid of friendlies. Make every international competitive. Get rid of the friendlies completely, and just go with Euro and World Cup qualifying in Europe. Same with South America. Just get rid of international friendlies. They are pointless. Or make international friendlies far more competitive by saying you've only got 3 subs. You've got to play. Players just don't really want to play them anymore. They're exhibition games. Get rid of friendlies completely. And the fact the Nations League is not on free-to-air TV is a joke as well. I'm not a big fan of that. I've never watched a Nations League game. You know why? Because I have Sky, and I'm not willing to get Sky. The fact that with my salary, yes, with my new job, when I first moved to this flat back in August, I was with my old company. I'm $3,000 a year better off with the company I'm with now. But I'm still only taking home just over 20. I think it's just over 21 grand a year. I'm not on great money. I'm I I'm just not on great money, and so the fact that I can't afford to go to see a football match. I mean, I could go to see Brentford play. I could go and see Reading play, or when Aldershot get back to the football league, just down the railway line. I could go. If I was lucky, try and go to Swindon Town. I could go see Oxford United with my girlfriend, or Swindon Town, because her sister lives in Swindon. So yeah, we could go to a game, and my girlfriend does, but is a Chelsea fan. But it's the expense, and she's not on a great wage either. So between us, we're taking home about 40 odd grand a year at the moment between us, and that's before tax. She's got financial issues to do with her past partner. I'm in an area where I live where rents are expensive. I'm lucky my rent is cheap, but it's gone up, and I am on a very long council housing waiting list. So yeah, money is difficult. So for fans, with the ticket prices as they are, with the TV deals that are in place, which are expensive, it's ridiculous. So I'm more for more free-to-air coverage, and I'm more for more accessibility. So we'll see what happens. How long BT have the Champions League and Europa League rights? Hopefully they lose them. They've lost the FA Cup from next season. BT Sport, which is brilliant. And Sky, it's all on ITV and BBC. There is no subscription TV coverage of the FA Cup from next season. It's all back on free-to-air, which I think is the FA realising we're losing viewers here. We're losing crowd numbers here. We need to do something, and they've gone to give it to ITV and BBC, share the rights, and I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not a fan of ITV's coverage of sport because there's too many ads on ITV. I prefer Channel 4 or Channel 5. They have less ad breaks, it seems, when they have live sport. But at the same time, free-to-air coverage is the way to go. It increases the viewership. On the Rio Ferdinand comparing Havertz to Berbatov, I didn't watch the game last night, but it's on BT. I'll only be able to watch the finals of the Europa League and Champions League later on this month. But Berbatov had a lengthy career, not just in English football, but in football. He played with Rio Ferdinand, and against him, he was a Tottenham player. Berbatov and Havertz are different, different players. Havertz has had a very short career. I don't think you can compare them just yet, and it's a one-off game that he's just played. If he was to consistently play like that over a season or two, and you look at his numbers when he's getting full run in the team, lengthy run in the team, and he's playing regular, consistent, then you can start to compare to a player who's played in the same league, in the same competitions, admittedly a decade or so before at his peak. Then you can look at the numbers, touched on them. But also, you've got to remember this, the game is different. The style of play is different. Tactics have changed. The pace of the game is even quicker than it was. VAR is a thing that's been thrown in there. But half of Berbatov's goals, I reckon, would be called back with VAR for some reason because of his positioning and where he was. VAR would have killed Berbatov's career. Not going to lie, he would have scored a lot less. But that's just me. Punditry, well, the quality level, you just look at what Sky and BT have done, where they've just gone with, they are tick box exercise. I miss Letizia. I have watched the occasional soccer on Saturday. It's not the same without Tiz. Letizia is, I think, one of the most intelligent footballing brains around. Underrated player, and I think a very underrated analyst. He's a very intelligent man, very humble man, very well spoken. He knows his stuff. But at the end of the day, I think punditry in general across all sports is going downhill a little bit. I think rugby league in Australia with the NRL, it's pretty decent. The amount of ex-players they have who have also done a lot of media work, and are surprisingly very well spoken. I think the players they've got on Fox over Channel 9 in Australia the ex-players are better. When you've got like Michael Ennis, I think he's one of the best ex-players when it comes to being a pundit, when it comes to being like a commentator and a presenter. He knows his stuff. He really knows his stuff. If we had the same caliber over here, I just don't think we have it. I really don't think we have it. I think Lineker, Shearer, Ian Wright, I think is my favourite. And I do like Micah Richards and Roy Keane as well. Roy Keane just speaks his mind. We need more characters like that. Unfortunately, TV companies go, oh no, we'll get complaints. Well, if you're going to hire someone who's that controversial, expect the complaints. Plain simple. Boris should do more. I think government should do more. The Six Nations for me should remain on free to air. I'm not a fan of CBC. Look what's happened with F1 going off free to air, going solely on Sky. Its viewership has plummeted and it's not as popular as it used to be. Regardless of who's winning, which is Hamilton. Is Hamilton a great driver? Yes. But has he just got the best machinery? Yes, because the rules are making it easier for him to win all the time. That's my personal opinion on that one. At the same time, F1 going off free-to-air TV is same with MotoGP, and the superbikes is slowly killing those sports. At the same time, motorsport itself is in a transition period with going fully electric and hybrid. So you could argue, okay, but no, I think the Six Nations should remain on free-to-air. We know the World Cups and Euros and that all the other international tournaments that involve football are. Cricket, again, I think it's T20 on one day and domestic test matches. That should be on free to air. The British and Irish Lions, yeah, rugby union I think has gone down the Sky route, the BT route. I don't think that's going to help it long term. What we do know is the FA are planning, and the Premier League are planning to have the rights frozen, the value of the rights frozen. So when it goes up to auction again, the rights won't increase for football. Rugby, we're just going to say rugby league's in serious trouble, where they're planning to shrink the Super League. So the Super League and the RFL questions have to be asked about the deals they've signed with Sky. The fact the sport is solely behind a paywall when it comes to domestic league games. Challenge Cup, you get about 5 games of the Challenge Cup on live free-to-air TV. That's not good enough. That doesn't grow the game. That doesn't highlight the lower level teams to a wider audience. And the reason why the British and Irish Lions is not on free-to-air is it's an overseas tour. If the British and Irish Lions had a domestic series where they invited the Aussies, the Argentinians, the South Africans, the Kiwis over, maybe the South Sea Islanders from the Pacific nations like Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa. If it was domestic, it would have to be on free-to-air because it's overseas. It's not. That's plain simple. It's not classed as a Category A sporting event because it's always overseas. I hope Channel 4's coverage. Channel 4 lost the coverage. They used to host the Island Games. So as long as BBC and ITV share the rights, because ITV is commercial, to me, that's good. Channel 4 is in financial difficulty. That's a well-known fact. I can see Channel 5 picking up a few more sports rights as well. They have a bit of domestic rugby union on Channel 5 with their agreement with BT. So we are seeing slowly a drip feed of more free-to-air. The viewership figures for those Premier League games at the end of last season that were free-to-air on BBC were brilliant. Far better than anything Sky has ever had or BT's ever had, even Amazon. And yes, England autumn internationals or not, they chased the Sky money. That hasn't gone down well. They tried it with the Six Nations in the early 2000s when Italy joined England. The RFU signed up to Sky, and their viewership plummeted. It lasted 2 seasons. Their Six Nations games suddenly came back on free-to-air TV very, very quickly. In my opinion, Rugby has got to be careful; it doesn't end up the same way as football. Yes, rugby union is a wealthier sport for the fan base. So the average fan is middle class, good income, good average salary, good income, predominantly homeowners. Predominantly middle and upper class. Rugby league and football is more of a working class person's game traditionally. Yes, you can have upper class and middle class fans. I'm not trying to start a class war. It's just the socio-economic fan base of these sports. And Sky BT punditry is terrible when it comes to commentary. That's why I like free-to-air coverage, when especially you've got nations that aren't England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland in football sense. When you're looking at a World Cup or a Euros, it's brilliant to watch international football on the BBC and ITV. When it comes to World Cups and Euros, when you are the neutral and you just want to watch brilliant, exciting football and go down the bookies. If you are a betting person, I'm not anymore, and place a bet. If the Autumn Internationals disappear onto Amazon, I think that will damage the brand massively. Massively. And Amazon's had a lot of negative press, mostly in the US, to do with some of its working practices. In my opinion, I think the Autumn International should remain free to wear as well. I'm more of a rugby league fan for club level, but I have my NRL subscription, so I can watch every single NRL game live on the Australian feeds that I wouldn't get on Sky. So TV license, so TV license people. But the problem is, like, the fact that the Championship used to be on BBC for a couple of seasons. That went. I think if you had some of the Football League games, Championship, League One, League Two, and free to air, that would help, because their TV deal was really poor. And the Lions tours, unless they're in South Africa, the time zone difference is chronic, absolutely chronic. Hence why it's on subscription TV, because they know they're not going to get the free to air viewership. Unless the Lions tour is in South Africa, I don't see why it should be. You won't get the viewers unless you've got some real diehards. I wish it wasn't free to air TV, but economically it doesn't make sense. You just wouldn't get the viewership. You wouldn't. That's why the Rugby League World Cup 4 years ago was only the England games were on free to air. Even Wales and Scotland and Ireland were behind the paywall on Sky, which in my mind was a shocking decision. It's a World Cup. If that's a football World Cup, it's on free to air TV. The only reason why we got cricket on Channel 5, the World Cup final, was England were playing. If England had lost that semi-final, we don't have that free to air final. Which I thought was naughty. I think that whole tournament should have been split free to air and paywall. We got one game, and the viewership figures backed it up. The Sky figures were embarrassing. So, in my opinion, it was a brilliant final. I watched the whole final. It was a brilliant final, the Cricket World Cup a couple of years ago. But yeah, in my opinion, I think we have to look at the TV rights, the media accessibility, free streaming like YouTube. Other sports have done it, but they've gone to YouTube. Look, we'll have some accessibility via YouTube with full match replays or live streaming, and it has had a positive impact. I love watching America's Nations Cup, which is the South American and North American version of the Six Nations. So US, Canada, Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, and an Argentinian 15 play. And that's on the World Rugby YouTube page. Brilliant. I love watching it. The Pacific Nations Cup back in the day, watch that on YouTube in full. That is a way to grow your audience for the smaller second tier nations that want to expand. But again, it's an economic thing. Cricket's killing itself because of the ECB. The ECB is killing cricket. The 100 is just, we're in the middle of a fucking pandemic. They're going to make a loss on it for years. And the feedback is 90% of fans just going, we'll just turn off. My local cricket club is half a mile down the road. I watched the game the other day. It was a good little game. It's grassroots level. Go support your grassroots clubs, because the higher end of cricket and the higher end of rugby union and to a certain extent rugby league are killing themselves. And the pandemic has exposed how bad their media rights deals are. India is not the biggest sport. Field hockey is. and cricket. Look at the IPL having to suspend operations because of the pandemic. They shouldn't have gone ahead with it. They put profits before safety. And we've seen that so many times in so many sports where profit comes first and safety, be it player welfare. We can talk about fixture congestion and player welfare in a variety of sports. Or we talk about the fan experience. It's become a bit of a circus. The fact that ECB are putting all their eggs in one basket with the 100 and hoping it's going to be a success, the feedback, it's not been great. Tottenham, with their new stadium, hoping to get NFL games. There's no NFL there at the moment because of the pandemic. And looking long term, is that going to be viable? I don't know. I think Tottenham are in deep trouble. There's rumours Harry Kane going to leave in the summer, buyout clause. They need to get some money. But no, I look at the situation with the 100 with the ECB. That's called desperation. That's called gimmick. When you're throwing sports with gimmicks like F1, when you're relying on gimmicks to try and keep interest in your sport, it says not that the actual sport itself has got problems. It's the TV rights, the viewership is the problem. It's not the sport. Cricket is a brilliant sport. I love the three formats we currently have with Test cricket, one day internationals and T20s, and then domestic game first class. I love it. I've watched the first class county game. I've watched the first class one day game. Domestically, I've watched T20. The way they've branded it and the way they've governed it is wrong. And the 100 format, you just look at the names of the teams. It's just, and the main sponsor's a fast food company. I mean, you're meant to be promoting health, activity, and I mean, cricket can be a sedate sport for those people. It's not a bad sport. It's not. There's a fair bit of activity. The bowlers, the fielders, the batsmen. It's an exhausting, sport to play. I played it. There'd be long periods of batsmen just blocking everything. The bowlers just, bowled a maiden. The batsman's just blocked everything. So it's only the bowler and the batsman really doing any movement. But then there's suddenly massive bursts of energy with running in between the wickets, fielders having to dive for catches and stops, a lot of movement. It's one of those sports where you're mentally fatigued more than anything. And you play in the hottest time of the year. Last summer, I know the pandemic was on, there was restrictions in place, there was limited cricket being played. But the heat the last 3 summers have been brutal. 2018, 2019, 2020, heat-wise, playing a test match for 5 days in that heat is a killer. The fact that some of these test matches have been done in a couple of days simply because one team is far superior than the others is irrelevant. When you're playing, 8-10 hours a day in 30+ degree heat with a high humidity, that is physically exhausting. I remember Jimmy Anderson. I think it was the 2009 Ashes, where he just bowled and he collapsed in the dressing room. I remember his Twitter. Was it 2009? It was one of the Ashes series where Jimmy Anderson basically bowled himself into the ground and collapsed in the dressing room on the floor and just passed out. To me, that's why it's called Test cricket, because it's the ultimate test. It's the same with rugby league. Some of the games in Queensland, they're playing 30 degree heat with about 80% humidity. So if you're a Titans fan, a Broncos fan, North Queensland Cowboys fan, and their home games, especially in North Queensland and Townsville, they're playing in 30 degree heat, 80% humidity. It's in the it's based on the edge of the tropics. I mean, and I was watching a game the other day, and the pitch side reporter, an ex-player, he was like, yeah, the temperature's still in the high 20s, low 30s, and the humidity is still about 80%, and you've got to play 80 minutes in that. It's a killer. It's the physical fitness. Would I watch American football in Britain? No. I've tired of the NFL series in London. It's been done to death, and of course, without them able to do it this season, and last season because of the pandemic. That's like Tottenham banking all their assets on being constantly in the Champions League places and maybe getting the odd trophy here or there, and selling this package with the NFL to host games there. They're massively in debt. Be interested to see what happens long term. It's like Major League Baseball. When they came over here, they delayed it by a year or two. They came over and it got mixed reviews because they were competing against the Cricket World Cup a year and a half ago. And that opinion, they got less interest because the Cricket World Cup was on. And using Jimmy Carr as an advertising tool was an absolute flop. Jimmy Carr is the last person I think I would want to advertise anything. Do I think Spurs could be the new Leeds? I think they're going to be worse than the new Leeds. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a mass player exodus. We know there are rumours concerning Harry Kane. That's their club captain. And him moving on. Son has signed a new contract extension. Harry Kane's there until at least 2023, but I can see a lot of players leaving. Lamela, when he's fit, is brilliant. I'm not going to lie. I think Lamela's a good player. I think he's underrated. His fitness has been an issue. But Lamela, Kane, they're regularly injured. They've got some good players in that squad. But unfortunately, it's the way the squad's put together and the fact they've won nothing. And some of the decisions that Levy has taken in the last 20 years have left me puzzled. They haven't won a trophy since 2008. They've not won the FA Cup since 91. They're not won the league since 61. They're not as they preach they're one of the big six. They can't win anything, and they look very likely to miss Europe this season when all is said and done. Now, if there are sanctions imposed against some of these clubs, these big six in England and the 12 across Europe, let's say there's sanctions, points deductions, and banning from Europe, Spurs could be relegated next season. If they would, let's say we go to the more extreme end of points deduction, let's say 30 points deducted. They are facing a relegation fight this season if that was the case. I can see a mass player exodus. I could see them ending up like Leeds, tumbling through the divisions. Blackburn have done it. As a Blackburn fan, I should know. Bradford City, they ended up, I think, still in League Two. Swindon Town and Oldham Athletic, they were founders of the Premier League. Look where they are now. Just because you're a big club doesn't mean you're going to bounce straight back up. I think if there were any other club there in administration, I do believe that, honestly. If they're any other club, they could do a Bolton, they could do a Wigan. Portsmouth, there was a bit of fraud to do with Portsmouth as well, but Portsmouth as well. I don't know. Tottenham are an interesting one. They're full of contradictions, and I'm not sure what the direction of this club is. At the first sign of a bit of a struggle, they've sacked the managers. You have to. Pochettino was given time. Poch was given time and came up short time and time again. He got to the Champions League final, but they played the worst Champions League final in living memory. And if Liverpool had turned up that day, they're losing by 6 or 7. So, whatever you think on Tottenham and some of the great nights they've had in Europe in the last decade or so, with some of the goals they've scored and some of the ties they've had, when it comes to the big crunch game, they crumble. And the last 2 seasons, they've done a bit more crumbling. And they do risk being the new Leeds, or even worse than the new Leeds. They risk being far worse than that. What is my laptop doing? And we crashed. Yep, I think the live stream has crashed. Let's get working. Please work. Please work. Please work. Oh God! But I don't know what my laptop's doing. It's not good. But yeah, I think the 30 points deduction could be interesting. If that was to take place, going on how games are being played, it would be interesting. Has this completely frozen? It would be interesting. Okay, so right, we've got live stream working. I just had to get up the live stream on my phone. My laptop froze, but the stream is obviously still working. Yes, too many clubs have fallen afoul of poor ownership, and in both the Premier League, the Football League, and the non-league as well. Dover Athletics, another one that's had problems, been kicked out of the National League and relegated with all their points stripped. But No, I think Tottenham could be in big trouble next season. Whether there's a points deduction or not, I can see a player exodus. Leighton Orient, another one. Yep, yep. They're on the way back up, but they tumbled through the divisions. Yeovil Town overextended themselves in when they got to the Championship, and they tumbled back through the divisions. And now in the non-league. There are so many clubs we could name. That have. Oh, it's just too many. Not just in England, but across Europe as well. It's not just an English problem. Parma in Italy is a prime example of a club that was mismanaged constantly. I don't know how many viewers are watching the basketball between Newcastle and Sheffield. I'd be really surprised to see the numbers and the viewership figures. But basketball isn't a sport that I enjoy watching. There's nothing against basketball. They're exceptional athletes. It's a high-paced game. It's just not. It's not a sport that I enjoy watching. Nothing against basketball, but there's a lot of sports that I think aren't my favourites, and I don't enjoy. That doesn't mean that the fans aren't passionate about it, and the athletes aren't supreme athletes. The fact that 700 people are actually watching that, it doesn't amaze me. I'm actually not. I think that's low, but I think it's the time of day that the game's been played. Bear that in mind. More people are returning to work. Kids, returning to school and college and university. So the timing of the match today, if it was a bit later in the evening, you might have a couple more hundred, if not a couple thousand more viewers. But at the same time, 700 is not bad viewership for a very minority sport. But the funding side of it is what it is. On the fact you're shocked, it's to do with, again, coverage and exposure and people playing the game, not just fans of the game, because we know there's fans of the game in this country. We know that not every school, but most schools have a sports hall, if they do, and their basketball courts inside. I've got friends who love playing the sport and watching the sport, but it's more to do with the exposure. I know the NBA takes games over here to Europe. It's very popular on the continent, but again, it's to do with grassroots funding. It's to do with it's to do with media presence, be it on social media or regional media or national media, and it's how advertising it. Trying to get a good marketing ploy, marketing the sport. And having the Boston Celtics, for example, I think they were the last team I think that came over here to do an NBA series game at the O2. I forget who they're playing. I think they're playing the Nuggets or something. The Boston Celtics is one of the biggest brands in the NBA. The Chicago Bulls are like in the 90s, for example. Golden State now, and so you've got the Los Angeles franchises. You've got the Knicks. It's all about, okay, great. You've got the overseas league, having a game over here or a series of games over here, but does that actually help the domestic game? Probably not. It's the same with the NHL when they take games to Europe. They have taken games over here. I mean, they played up in Belfast in the pre-season. They played in Switzerland. They played in the Czech Republic. They played in Slovakia, Finland, Sweden. It's all well and good. I know the Flyers played a couple of games against the Swiss team in the pre-season, and they lost a couple of them as well. At the same time, these sports have to give something back, especially the NBA and the NHL. If they're taking in the NFL, if they're bringing games over here. And because these leagues are so wealthy, if you take the pandemic out of it, I honestly believe as they are drafting, especially the NHL, drafting the best European players, because you don't have to be a university player to get into the NHL. Same with the rugby as well, with Major League Rugby. That's a growing league and all that, and the new North American Rugby League. If they suddenly become big, especially, I think with the NHL especially, I think they should give some more back to the European leagues where they draft the best players from, be it some kind of funding or yes, they're bringing exhibition games over here and regular season games over here, but I think there's more they could do with. They could partner up with leagues and give some funding and growth. But ice hockey as a sport in Europe and over here as well is actually quite popular and has pretty established leagues. It's just financially, it's a bit more precarious. Um, Basketball, there's just no funding. On the continent, it's better funded at school, at grassroots, at community level, because you have the community-based club where the members own the club, especially in Spain and the Balkans. It's That's, I think, for me, where basketball has a stronger imprint on the continent. It's far better. The arenas are got bigger stadiums. There's more fans, better TV deals, better media rights deals, better sponsorship, better coverage, just in general, better advertising. You go to the Balkans and you go to Spain and you go to Eastern Europe. They're national leagues. These guys are superstars. These guys are well-known celebrities, and the women as well. They are very well known. The best players end up, guess what? Yep, playing in the NBA. They go over, they get scholarships at university, for example, or they get, signed as free agents, and they get some big money. There are some very well-known overseas, non-American, non-Canadian players in the NBA. And part of that is to do with the domestic league. It's like Liam Kirk getting drafted by the Arizona Coyotes in the NHL. It's because the British domestic league has grown. It's got a TV deal. The quality level is better. And yes, we are now playing at the World Championship at the highest level. And we've had players play in the KHL and the SHL. So the quality level has improved. And the organisation of the fan groups, they are loud and very vocal. And especially in the Balkans and in Central and Eastern Europe, very popular. Spain, there's a lot of good Spanish players playing in the NBA as well. And yeah, European basketball has a brilliant atmosphere compared to other sports. But again, there's a cultural thing there as well. There was a lot of government funding in the Cold War between the 50s and the 90s, where governments put a lot of money into their Olympic programs, their educational programs, university programs, and they pumped money into the sport. Over here, it wasn't seen as a sport that needed funding. It wasn't a sport that young people were playing. There is an uptick. It is growing, but it's still such a minority sport. It gets a whole lot less funding than field hockey and ice hockey. They're better. There's better leagues. There's more clubs. There's more players, and they're more expensive sports to play. Rugby league, rugby union, cricket. There's more community clubs. Football. It's competing against more established sports where the national sides are better. For one, where we win stuff and we can compete at World Championships and we can compete at Olympic Games and we can compete at Euros and things like that. Yeah, I mean, the football and ice hockey are the two biggest sports on the continent of Europe. Basketball is the third biggest sport on the continent. Here, I think it ranks 6th or 7th. I mean, it's got very low participation rates. Registered players is really low. Rec teams, there's not enough of them, and not enough kids when they leave school want to keep playing it. It's plain and simple. I look at it, and on the curriculum when it comes to sport, I think every school has a football team. Depending where you are in the country, it's either rugby league or rugby union if you want to play rugby. If your school has a team. Cricket, there's a lot of community cricket clubs. More private school, but there are state schools that play cricket as well. It just depends where you are in the country. Basketball, when kids leave school, they don't sign up for a rec team with their mates. They will sign up for a five-a-side football team. They will sign up with the Sunday pub team. They will, the local Sunday cricket club, for example. They will sign up with other sports because they're more accessible. They're better established. It does have to compete. And yeah, I don't know where everyone is in the country, but we had the Thames Valley Tigers as a basketball team locally. They don't exist anymore. They were national champions at one point back in the early 2000s, late 90s. The domestic league did start to struggle in the early 2000s. Same with ice hockey's always through a bit of a dip. And the elite league has grown, and the national league has grown, and the old EPI, AHL, and all that. But it took a good decade to get out of that trough. Well, got me Sport Blackburn Rovers. Well, that's a long story, really. I just watched them on TV with my dad, plain and simple, when I was a couple of years old. My dad used to play in the non-league for Dorchester Town, played football for the Army, played rugby for the Army as well, and he was a very passionate sports fan, and so am I. We supported different teams, which was all very interesting when it came to rugby, when it came to rugby league, when it came to football, when it came to ice hockey. But he was a very passionate sports fan, and so am I. He was just a bit better at sport than I was. But at the end of the day, like, it's what it is. On UEFA claim to be for the fans. I mean, look, Villa have put in, an application to be there in case, because we don't know what's going to happen with what's going on in Asia, and Turkey is predominantly Asian. Yes, their clubs play in European football, but I think it's 85% of the country lies in Asia, 25% or something lies in Europe. Istanbul's hosted many finals, but this is an agreement that goes back, I think, 3 or 4 years. And on the side of Istanbul being given it, that was announced 3 years ago. If it does come to pass, Villa have put in an application to UEFA should there be any issues. I think it makes logical sense, being at both teams in the final are English teams. I mean, if you had PSG and Real Madrid, I would say somewhere like Switzerland might be like Zurich or Bern would be a good option, or maybe like Dortmund, the Westfalenstadion would be a good option to play the game, because it's sort of fair for both those teams. Yeah, both teams English. It's a midpoint between Manchester and London. It makes logical sense, but UEFA are obviously sticking with their contractual obligations to Istanbul, and that's fair enough to UEFA. At the end of the day, it is fair enough. They've been to Istanbul several times before, so they have a good relationship with the Turkish FA when it comes to the infrastructure in place in Istanbul. But I don't know. Personally, I really don't know. I think they've stuck with this final. It was penciled in. They've stuck with it. They did the same last year with no fans in attendance in August. For me, it just makes logical sense in the short term, but we just don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic and any further increases in the infection rate. It would make sense keeping both teams in England. It would make sense that we are allowing some fans in on trial things with the authorities. It would make sense. It's halfway between both clubs. So we'll see what happens. When it comes to school, yeah, daughter school, boys, rugby, football, basketball, cricket, girls, football, basketball, netball rounders. That's interesting. My girlfriend used to play rugby at school, so more girls are playing rugby at school. British basketball, if they do well and win a couple of games, then absolutely, I think it can grow the sport. But at the same time, it's again getting that coverage. Turkish fans will go to the final if allowed. Of course, they would. Football in Turkey is a religion, especially in Istanbul and the coastal cities. Istanbul is the centre of football in Turkey. I understand why UEFA have gone there, and when they signed the agreement all those years ago, and they don't want a lawsuit, basically. But again, it'll be interesting to see, what actually happens, if at all, anything. It's a difficult one, but we will see what happens in regards to the Champions League final. But there's contractual arrangements in place, and I think a lot of people right now with this Super League mess, they want just to get the final played, get it done, and over with, and fulfil contractual obligations, because I think UEFA are reeling from the Super League a little bit, but they're in a strong position right now. And the Turkish FA, they've signed a contract for all those sponsors around the stadium and the money they get from hosting a final. The same for them. I mean, Turkish football without fans is hemorrhaging money. It's not Turkish football. While it's well supported, the money isn't as there as you think. Turkish clubs aren't as wealthy as people think. So they need this final to take place. It makes sense to have it at Villa Park. It makes sense to have it in Birmingham. But at the same time, we'll see what happens. The fact that Dublin has lost its Euros 2021 games and that Wembley's gained another one is interesting as well. There's talks about having the whole tournament in England for the Euros. We don't know what's going to happen with the Euros yet. So there's a lot of things up in the air. I don't know if any fans are allowed to travel. I mean, they would have to leave now, pretty much, to quarantine, wouldn't they? Again, we'll have to see what happens if there's any fans allowed in, if anyone is brave enough to make the trip. At the same time, I think Turkey will be just dying to get anyone to spend any Turkish lira right now. At the same time, we'll have to see what happens with the Champions League final. But yeah, we know about Villa putting forward their application and having discussions with UEFA. UEFA is sticking with the Champions League finalists now. Whether that changes is nothing. The Olympic Stadium, yes and no. They've had it at Wembley before. They've had Champions League finals and in England before and across Europe in various stadiums over the years. For me, we'll wait and see. I don't think the Olympic Stadium. I mean, ask West Ham fans what they feel about the London Stadium and the atmosphere there and how far they are from the pitch. West Ham fans haven't been enamoured with the old Olympic Stadium since they moved there from Upton Park in the last couple of years. So, and I haven't been overly keen on when the football at the Olympics in 2012 was there. I didn't think it was the right stadium to play games. We've seen it with rugby league and rugby union playing games there as well in the World Cups. But then you have an unfair advantage with the home team being Man City. Then the Etihad could obviously, or Old Trafford, or Anfield, or Goodison Park, or any major Premier League stadium could host the Champions League or Europa League final at some point. But again, you have to bid as the host city to say we want it in this stadium. And yeah, we'll see what happens with the Euros because UEFA are still thinking that host the whole tournament in England because of our vaccine rollout, because of our low infection rate, because the death rate has completely plummeted, the infection rate has completely plummeted, and we are opening up slowly but surely, whereas the rest of Europe is in a mess. That's something that's been on the table for a good couple of months. UEFA are considering this. This is before the European Super League kicked off. So that's something to consider, if I'm honest. That is something to consider. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if any other cities lose more games and if they go, right, we'll have the whole tournament in England with limited fans in attendance, if any, get the teams quarantined. A lot of the players already play in the Premier League anyway, or in the Championship. So a lot of the players are already based in England with their clubs. So there you go. The Bolton, the old Reebok, or as I think it's the University Stadium. I don't know. The India with the IPL, there were question marks over the IPL even starting, and then it started, and then I don't know if it's. I know it's been suspended. I know the IPL has been suspended. They have suspended play, but I'm just going to quickly check on the IPL because the announcement was made yesterday or the day before they were suspending play. I thought I'd do a video, but my girlfriend was here, and I said we were busy tidying things up. But I was constantly keeping updated with the news. But English counties offered to host postponed IPL matches. So now England stepped up. A group of counties have written to the England Wales Cricket Board about the possibility of hosting the remainder of the IPL. The 2020 tournament was suspended on Tuesday, so it was 2 days ago. Several positive tests amongst players. There is no suggestion that the BCCI, which is the Board of Cricket Control in India, is looking for a new venue. Warwickshire, Surrey, and Marylebone, so Middlesex basically, are interested parties. There are reports that Lancashire were involved, and it's understood they have not offered their Old Trafford home as a potential venue. 8 England players have returned home from the IPL. An ECB spokesman said, we speak to the Indian equivalent regularly about tours and other matters, and will continue to do so, but we have received no indication that they are looking for alternative hosts for the IPL at the moment. Wherever the remaining 31 games are played, any attempt to rearrange them will have to contend with a packed schedule of Test cricket. England a 5-test series against India on the 14th, and are due to travel to Bangladesh and Pakistan before the T20 World Cup begins in October. However, finishing the IPL in the UK at the end of September would see at least England and India squads in the same place, while some other international players may still be in the country following the conclusion of the 100. It makes logical sense, but the 100 can go sod itself. But yeah, so that has broken in the last hour that the ECB and several counties who make up the county championship are, posturing to say finish the IPL here. It means India's players are all over here, England's players are all over here, and other international players will be here as well. The T20 World Cup, I mean, yeah, we're going to play against Pakistan and Bangladesh. They're neighbouring countries of India. I don't know. I think 8 English players have returned. We'll see what happens. We will. I think if Arsenal and Man United, if their final in the Europa League gets moved, I think that is unfair on Poland. But again, Poland's had issues with pandemic as well, and Arsenal fans are protesting right again. And this is what's happened. This Super League thing has united not just football fans, but I think sports fans in general about how badly run professional sport is, not just in England, but across Europe and across the world. Fans don't seem to be consulted on changes. We're seen as an afterthought. Without fans, sport is nothing. And I'm a rugby league fan. I love the NRL. Watching 7 rounds, I think it was the first round 3 to round 7 last year with no fans in attendance was depressing last year when it resumed. I watched every round and almost every game of the NRL last season. No fans in attendance. While the games were brilliant, you could hear all the players, you could hear the referees talk to the players and all that. It was not great. When they started allowing fans back in, the atmosphere came back a bit. The fact that Arsenal are protesting yet again outside the Emirates tells you something. This fans have been angry at the ownership for a while. I mean, there was protests against Wenger's, time in charge towards the end. I said, be careful what you wish for. Arsenal right now, I mean, Arteta, I think, has done a good job with what he's got. If they win the Europa League, they qualify for the Champions League. Look at their league position right now. But the ownership hasn't really cared about the club itself and the fans. They care about money. Same with the Glazers. Same with a lot of these owners. Racked with debt. I'll have to double check that. All I know is the IPL is suspended. It hasn't been cancelled. The fact that the ECB and some of the counties have talked to the BCCI, which is the Board of Cricket Control in India, about playing the rest of the games here is interesting. But we'll see. How do I think Graham Potter's done at Brighton? He's done a pretty good job. He's done a very good job. He's kept them in the Premier League. He's kept them consistent. They need to make that next step. But he did great things in Swedish football with the club he took from the bottom to the top. So he has proven himself as a young manager. He got outside in the Swedish league. He took a team that was hopeless and made them, one of the best teams in Sweden. Same with Solskjaer at Molde. They go, it's only the Norwegian league. He won trophies with them. He learned his managerial ropes in a lesser league, yes. Graham Potter at Brighton's a very good fit. I think he would look at Spurs and go, no, that's too much of a risk. I think he's happy at Brighton. I think he's happy with what he's got at Brighton. I think he's happy with the ownership. He's happy with the playing squad. The fans love him. It's like Eddie Howe at Bournemouth. There were many calls to get Eddie Howe from Bournemouth to a bigger club or England, and he stuck with Bournemouth until the end of last season. I don't know who would want the Spurs job. It's the same. So many clubs have had bad ownership, and fans feel uninvolved and badly treated. And you look at the last 14, 15 months, I think, with what COVID has exposed is how badly run not just football but so many sports are, be it on a financial side, be it in the domestic leagues, or in just governance in general. We'll see what happens. Gareth Southgate, he's got an international tournament to prepare for. Spurs will be mindful of that. That'll be very disruptive. I think the FA will be mindful of that as well. I'm not sure how good Southgate will be as a club manager since he hasn't been involved in club football since his Middlesbrough days. So in my mind, when someone's been out the club game that long, I don't know. I think it was a mistake of them sacking Mourinho. That was their best chance to win silverware. And it was a poor final because Man City can't hit a target and Tottenham can't even take a shot. So we'll see what happens with Spurs. There's been no movement on a manager because every manager they're interested in is either not available or has signed a contract extension. And Southgate, he's national manager, and I think the FA will be like, yeah, let's focus on the Euros. We have a good chance, and we do if we play the right way. The way we played in the World Cup qualifiers and the friendlies, I'm a little bit miffed. Haaland and Sancho, I think that'll be interesting. It will, but from what we hear, Sancho is really, really happy at Dortmund. He's doing really well at Dortmund. Haaland, there's a lot of speculation about Haaland as a player. I don't know. Haaland's more likely, I think, to move, but he's very highly rated. But at the same time, Dortmund are trying to build a good core around these young players, and we'll see what happens. Well, Man United failed to sign him in the January window. They got Cavani instead. I think we'll see. Is Southgate the right man for England? Well, he got us to a World Cup semi-final. It'll be interesting to see how the Euros goes. I think the Euros will be, is he the right man or not? The FA regularly have reviews. It's like Jurgen Löw at Germany. This is his last tournament. He's moving on. I think Germany's run its course for this cycle that they've been in. I'm not sold on Southgate, but I'm not against Southgate because at least it's an English manager. He's worked with the youth setup. He's worked with a lot of these players coming through. He's young himself. He doesn't strike me as a hard taskmaster, though. He doesn't strike me as a very firm individual. He doesn't strike me as a disciplinarian. And we've seen various squad breaches of discipline regularly, and players, muck about. I don't know. Depends on how the Euros go. If England do very well at the Euros, like they did the World Cup in Russia, that then changes things. But they need to improve their style of play. If Haaland wants $1 million a week, that is ridiculous in the current climate. But that's again his agent pressurising for that. So I don't think necessarily the player. I think that's the agent. This is where regulation on agents. Yeah, we'll see what happens at the Euros. I'm open to what happens at the Euros. To be brutally honest, it's what it is. Well, we tried it with Sven. Was interesting. I mean, the 5-1 over Germany was brilliant. The qualifying campaign to get to the 2002 World Cup was brilliant, and then the wheels came off after that. Then we had Steve McLaren. The wheels definitely came off with him. And then we had Capello, which was hit and miss. So I don't know. Eddie Howe would be a good shout. But we'll have to see what happens. Like, in my opinion, I mean, Glenn Hoddle, I think, was pretty good while he was in charge. He had a good group of players. It just went wrong at that World Cup. But I think had he not said what he said in the media and made some comments that got him sacked, I think Glenn Hoddle would have still been manager for the 2002 World Cup, and we would have done better. That's my personal opinion. I think we would have done better in the 2002 World Cup and Euro 2000, but they decided to go down a different think with Venables, they decided to go with a different direction, and it didn't pay off. Roy Hodgson, I don't think was necessarily, he was a stopgap, but he did the best he could with the available pieces. I don't bemoan Roy Hodgson for being England manager. I really don't. I think he got a lot of a crap in the media. I think Roy Hodgson took a lot of heat. He guided England through a very tricky period. He qualified for every tournament. The fact that those tournaments we weren't great is to do with a whole period of decline for the national side and players not performing and managers getting the tactics wrong. And he inherited a side that was a bit shocking in 2012. 2014, the World Cup was a bit of a disaster. 2016 was a bit of a disaster. Southgate comes along. But I think Roy Hodgson has started to see some of these young players, and this is where I think Southgate, I don't know. I think Roy Hodgson was in a difficult position with how the World Cup went in 2010. When he comes in, he was given, that wasn't his squad. He was thrown in 2012, and he did reasonably well. 2014 was a shit show. 2016 was a shit show. We can all agree on that. But I don't think that's all necessarily his fault. But I'm of the opinion that we need to get the defence right, play on the counter attack, quick pace counter attack, because we cannot play lengthy possession football. We become slow, methodical, and plodding. If we get the quick pace counter attack right, these young attacking players will do wonders. And Roy Hodgson's a very experienced quality manager. He's a good man manager as well. He knows how to deal with players as individuals as well as a team collective. He does have a pretty decent working relationship with the media, which is important. Question about the Q&A, would you consider doing ones with other people, perhaps a co-host? It has crossed my mind before. At the same time, with the current situation we find ourselves in with the pandemic and me working a full-time job as well, it's something I've thought about, but the channel needs to be a lot bigger, and it's getting contact with the right people to sit down and do a podcast, basically. But at the moment, I don't have the time or the space. That's the problem. If the channel starts becoming successful, then I'm more than happy to consider, having a co-host or having guests on. That would be something I would enjoy doing. But I'd also like to do like the news videos and talk about history and stuff. But topics like this, I mean, it would be interesting because then you have a different point of view. There will be someone who would disagree. I mean, my neighbour Adam, I think, would be, for me, my perfect co-host right now because he is through and through. But he wouldn't want to talk about other sports unless it's to do with the IPL cancelling and what does that mean? Should they have gone ahead? All this kind of stuff. When it comes to other sports, football is his thing. Motorsports is second favourite. After that, he doesn't have the interest in other sports. For me, rugby league, motorsport, rallying, motocross, touring cars, NASCAR, things like that. I watch multiple sports where I'm really, interested. But at the same time, again, it's all about making sure that I don't have to software on my laptop for starters, and making sure it all works, and internet connection, and a whole host of things. And the channel isn't big enough right now. I want to get the channel a little bit bigger before I even consider that. The channel's got to be making not only making money, but actually paying for itself, where I can actually get better laptop, better microphones, a better webcam, better setup. My flat is too small to turn into a studio. Just don't have the space at the moment, so the channel would have to massively grow. And if then I could do that full time rather than being a bin man, I would. Let's just say that if this could earn me enough money where I didn't have to work at night, well, in my case, wake up at 4 a.m. every bloody day and do a 12-hour day, then I would do it in a heartbeat. I would. But as things currently stand, it's of course not the case. I would love to do that. It's just not the case. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I'm going to call that a stream because I've got to do a fair bit of housework. I've got another day off tomorrow, so there'll be another live stream tomorrow at some point. But I've got to do a fair bit of housework. My mum's coming over with some houseworking supplies, so I've got to see my mum. But thank you very much. Obviously, apologies for the stream being a bit laggy about a half hour ago. It just seemed my screen just froze, even though it was actually working online when I checked on my phone. But I really appreciate all the questions. It's been a bit more interesting because a lot of sports link into each other with financial issues. You know, the Champions League, Aston Villa going, we'll host the final if we have to. In ECB going, we'll host the rest of the IPL if we have to. Fan protests. That is something that is growing in intensity, and TV rights, another big thing. And apparently Sky Internet's been bad for about 2-3 days now. That's not just a one-off. I've been seeing people on various community forums that I'm on, like local to where I live, going, has anyone else had problems with Sky? Now, I'm a Vodafone and EE customer. I don't use my EE internet at the moment, but I'm a Vodafone customer. My internet's been fine. But I do know people have been having issues with Sky. So if you are having internet issues, just try and watch the streaming full when you can later on. Thank you very much for watching. I will also have some other videos for you. I'll be following the IPL news overnight to see what happens. I'll also be following the Champions League news if Villa Park does get named to the stadium or not. So we'll see what happens. Thank you very much for watching. I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.